Recording's on.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Irene Pasternak. I teach in the Telos program and in continuing education at BC, teaching movement classes, teaching a lovely, fun way to change movement habits so that we can stay more comfortable. And in today's class, we're going to be focused on strategies for sitting and an introduction to the method that I use, which is called the Feldenkrais method, which is just a lovely way to change movement habits. If you're willing, I really do like it if I can see you, because that way I can adjust my instructions for what I see happening. So a couple things to know as we get started. One is that we're human beings and we're learners. And we don't learn very well if we're scared or uncomfortable or feel unsafe. And so the number one thing in this class is if I ask you to do something and it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Stop. Do it smaller, do it slower. It's the opposite of a exercise class where there's the no pain, no gain philosophy. Here it's we stay safe and comfortable the whole time. And in order to do that well, one of the things that I need to know from all of you is if you're in pain right now. So if you're in no pain right now, put up a fist like this. And if you're in pain that's like, oh my gosh, this is just agonizing this morning, give me a 5. And then wherever you are in between. Okay. And for those of you who aren't showing yourself, I'm going to assume the 2. Okay. So I don't see anybody who's in major pain right now. That's good, because I adjust what I'm teaching based on pain levels in the class. So I want to practice that a little bit, that idea of how do you move, staying in the easiest possible way to move. So go ahead and push your chair back from your computer a little bit and lift an arm, and lift it really slowly. And you'll feel in the beginning of the lifting that it's easy. And then you get a little higher and it starts feeling thick. Like instead of moving in air, you're moving in molasses or something a little thicker. Okay. And do it a couple times and see if you can find a way to stop an inch before the thick spot. So it's, So we're going to play in this class with the beginning of movement rather than the end point of the movement, because we're practicing shooting an arrow with our movements, and if we aim right, everything works better. Okay. Now, it sounds easy, but this is going to be the hardest thing I ask of you all morning, is to stay in the realm of comfort. We're just not so used to doing that. The other is I'd like you to come and sit toward the front of your chair so that if you look down at your thighs, there's air underneath both thighs. Okay. Third thing is that when I ask you to do something, I want you to do it and undo it. So like when I ask you to raise your arm, do it and put it down again. And we are going to work one-sided for a little while because it wakes your brain up to noticing changes. But today's focus is the introduction. So it's the how to learn a new habit for movement. And then we're also going to be focusing on the neck. So let's do a measurement move just to see how your necks are doing now. And turn and look over one shoulder and come back. Do it again and notice what stopped you. How did you know that you were getting to the place where the movement was not going to be comfortable if you went further? Okay. And then turn the other way. And did you do your easier side first? Most people do the easier side first. Okay. So go, whichever side is easier, go to the easier side and turn that way again. And notice what you can see on your wall. Just how far can you see? All right, good. So now we're going to start this lesson, and I'd like you to put your hands on your cheeks and your elbows as together as they go. Good. And now turn your elbows to your easy side. It's like turn and come back. And do that a few times. And begin to notice if your knees are doing anything. You might have a sense that one knee goes a little forward and one knee goes a little backward. Put your hands down for a moment. I'm noticing some of you are in wheelie chairs, swiveling office chairs, and you could be having your chair do the movement. So instead of moving your body, you're like here, I'm just turning my chair. If that's the case, if you have like a dining room chair or something you could sit in, that would be great. Or else just kind of be aware that I'm in a chair and that I'm trying to give myself the lesson and not my chair the lesson. Okay. So how many people notice their knees moving? Okay. So there's a little bit of a forward-backward movement with the knee. And sometimes one knee will come in a little bit. So the knee is one end of the thigh bone, and the other end of the thigh bone goes right into our pelvis. And so the other side of the knee is the sit bone, and we're going to find our sit bones. So on the side you're turning to, take your hand and imagine you were putting it into your back pocket in a pair of jeans, except you're just outside the pocket. And you slide your hand under your bottom, and you're going to find a big bone under there. I'm looking at faces because the expression usually changes when people either can find it or can't find it. Okay. Now, once you find that bone, wiggle around on it a little bit. So try and take your body behind it, take your body in front of it, take your body left or right. Okay. And then lighten it a little bit. So put your weight on the other sit bone and take that sit bone and pull it backwards. And if you have your other hand on your other knee, when you pull one sit bone backward, you'll feel the other knee goes a little forward, where the knees go like that. Okay, good. All right. So now turn and look over your shoulder again on this easy side and see if anything's a little different. Okay. And deliberately slide your sit bones. So on the side you're turning to, slide that sit bone back in the chair and slide the other one forward. And notice, I'm seeing, and you can see in each other, that people are turning their heads, just being able to turn a little further. So what did we do? We didn't do any stretching, we didn't do any strengthening, but suddenly instead of getting to here, you're being able to see quite a bit further in the room. In the basic idea of movement is that we move based on our mental map of ourself. And most people's mental map of their head is, I've got a lollipop with a short stick. And if I want to move my head, I move my short stick. And when we sit at the computer all day like that using a short stick, we get a really sore neck. So I just gave you a little experience of being a lollipop with a long stick that goes all the way down to your sit bones. So let's play with that idea a little bit. So if you deliberately move your sit bones, so you slide one forward and the other one backward, there's 24 vertebrae between the base of your skull and your pelvis. So if you think about turning each one of those vertebrae just a little bit, and go ahead and try that as you're turning. So you turn the sit bones, and then think about every 2 inches in your back, there's another joint that can turn a little bit, and see what it's like to turn when you use all of those joints. Now, most of us, when we first start doing this, it's as if we have 2 or 3 joints in our spine. It's like we don't feel them all. So try it again. And this time, imagine your favorite color and imagine like a neon vertebrae. So you can think of your vertebrae simply like a fist or a spool of thread, and turn it your favorite color as you turn until you have this lovely glowing spine. a lovely piece of art inside. And do it and come back. Now, when you were thinking of those vertebrae, what direction were you looking at them from in your mind's eye? Were you looking at them from the front, from the back, from the side? Try a different perspective of looking on them. Like when you're looking at a piece of art and you want to walk around it and look from different sides. But go ahead and turn again, just thinking about a different side of it. All right. And come back. Now, look up at the ceiling for a moment. And then look down at the floor. And notice, did you use your long stick or your short stick to do that? Our habits of movement, they're strong, and we use things the same way we've always done it. So it's not surprising if you use your short stick, but let's try using the long stick. So to use your long stick to look down, imagine somebody's got a hold of your pants in the back by the middle belt loop, and they pull you back there. And then you pull your belly in and your pelvis tilts back as you look down at the floor. So your whole spine, if you were looking at me in the side, the whole spine makes a letter C and curves. Go ahead and try that a few times. This is part of why we have to be toward the front of our chair so that there's room in the middle to do that. Okay. And then to look up, does everybody know where their hip joints are? Where their thigh comes into their pelvis. So sometimes if I ask people to touch their hips, they'll touch up here, kind of on the top of that bone. Go ahead and find that for a moment. You can take your hand kind of like that, and it just sits nicely over this bone, which is the top of your pelvis. And we found your sit bone down at the bottom, which you can't see on this picture, but your thigh bone goes into your pelvis at an angle. So the shaft comes up and then it makes a right angle and it goes in there. So that diagonal line is kind of on the line where when you're sitting, your pants crease, and about halfway between the inside edge and the outside edge. That's about where the closest you can get to your hip joint on the surface from the front. So fold forward there. That's a nice ball and socket joint, so it's easy to fold. And then push your belly out, and only then tip your head back. So again, looking in profile, if I'm arching, my back is making a curve the other way. And just like with this silly pool noodle, you want your head to be right over your tail. You don't want to arch back this way. That's a lot of muscular effort that you don't need. So that's why we start by coming forward at the hip joint, which sends the tail out a little bit behind, so the head is right over it. And go back and forth between those a few times. Yeah. Thinking about all 24 of those vertebrae. And a vertebrae, like a spool of thread, when it bends, they gap on one side and press together on the other. So you can visualize a little bit of that kind of motion in each vertebrae. Kind of like the yoga cat and cow if you've ever done a yoga class. Okay. And you feel, now I want you to pay attention to your sit bones as you do this. When you round yourself to look down, your body goes behind your sit bones. It's like you can feel the sit bones come a little forward. And when you arch and push your belly and your chest forward, you come a little in front of your sit bones. Becoming friends with your sit bones is going to be the most important thing for staying comfortable on Zoom. Because when we, and we'll play with this more as we go, but it's a very important piece of anatomy. because we're trying to stack ourselves up on our bones so that our muscles don't have to hold us up. If our muscles are holding us up, they're not meant to hold for hours, the way the bones are just like it's a physical structure for ourselves. Okay. So now let's do that rounding down and arching up again, but this time thinking about your ribs. Before we start, put your hands on your ribs. Okay. And then put your hands on your highest rib, the top rib. Where's your top rib? This is another one of those mismaps, like I have a short stick. Okay, so little anatomy piece. Find your sternum, or the notch right in the top of your neck here, which is at the top of your sternum. There's like a soft spot, and then if you press down a little lower, there's bone. And then from there, if you go out to the sides and up toward your shoulder, you'll feel your collarbone. And the collarbone goes from the sternum out to the tip of the shoulder through a kind of curvy path. Okay. Your first rib leaves from like a quarter inch, half an inch under your collarbone. So right there in the front. And then in the back, if you put your hand on the back of your neck, you'll feel there's a bump there. That's where the top rib connects in the back. So the top rib is like a choker necklace, kind of like the V line of my shirt is the top rib. And the ribs go from there, and then let's find the bottom ribs. It's easy in the front. You can kind of slide down the curve of your rib cage. And then if you keep going down toward the side of your body and back a little, there's two floating ribs back there that don't connect in the front. So the ribs completely cover the front of yourself there, the sides from your armpit down, and the back. So round and look down and feel which ribs squeeze together, which parts, and which parts spread apart. So as you look down, where do you squeeze? And as you roll forward over your hips and look up, where do you arch? Where do the ribs spread? Where do they compress? It's funny because the English language has some very confusing words in it. One of them is rib cage. Now, when you think of a cage, what do you usually think of? Iron bars with animals inside or something. And our ribs are more like a spring than a cage. So we're going to think about the rib spring. Okay. Now, on the side that you were working on turning toward, take your hands and put them on the side of your chair. And if that feels like too much for your body, you could put them on the side of your leg. Okay. And in this twisted position, pull your belly in and look down. And then arch your back and look up. And as you pull your belly in and look down, your weight goes on to one sit bone, the one kind of behind you from the way you're facing. And as you arch and look up, let your weight shift to the side you're looking up toward. And keep doing that movement, looking for what's happening in your ribs, because here they're going to arch, or they're going to spread and contract in different places. All right, and rest for a moment. The resting isn't necessarily because the body gets tired, but the brain needs a tension break for a moment. Right. And now turn and look over that shoulder and see what it's like now. Okay. Looks like people are turning a little easier, a little more comfortably. So now your mental map of yourself is lollipop with a stick that goes down to your sit bones, that there are 24 vertebrae in between their joints, and there are ribs that can spread and contract. And just that mental map of yourself, go ahead and using that mental map, turn the other way and see if the other way has also improved. If your sit bones turn, you've got all those vertebrae, some ribs spread. Okay. So if you ever get to drive again, you're going to be a safer driver because it's easier to turn and look over your shoulder to see what's happening. And it's funny because we have part of movement habits are we have these internal rules, this internal voice that talks to us. It's like good people only use their short stick. And where those rules inside come from comes from our history, perhaps how we were in our family, what our culture says is appropriate movement, whatever. But just being able to take away some of those extra rules and use your whole body to get done what you need to get done. And in sitting and teaching a Zoom meeting, being online on your computer doing prep or an office work, it's how do you support that head? Because our heads are like a bowling ball, 10 pounds or 15 pounds for bigger people. And as soon as that head gets a little bit off the skull, off the spine, it gets heavier. So if it's 5 degrees forward, it's 20 pounds, 10 degrees, whatever. And so we're just trying to get that whole spine underneath. Now, let's play with another idea that I'll be doing more in tomorrow's class on eyes, but go ahead and turn to your easy side and notice the path that your eyes take. Do they go in a straight line? Do they go up at the end or down in the end? Okay. And come back. Do it again, and this time notice what you see. Just kind of catalog some objects along the way. And now, this next time, imagine that your eyes are on the back of your head. And so when your front eyes are seeing one side of your room, your back eyes will be seeing the other side of the room. So go ahead and let your turn thinking about what your back eyes are seeing. And do that a few times. Do your back eyes curve and go up? Do your back eyes curve and go down? It's a strange idea thinking about back eyes. And do you turn further or easier or somehow differently when you're thinking about your back eyes or your front eyes? Go ahead and try the front eyes again. One of the things that Zoom and our whole culture does to us is, we spend time looking in mirrors. And we think of ourselves as a two-dimensional being, like a paper doll. But we have volume. Put your hands on your head and just feel how thick your head is from front to back. Okay. And then on your belly and your low back, feel how thick your body is front to back. And imagine that somebody has hands in all those places and that they are turning you as if you were, like if I took my coffee cup and wanted to turn it, one hand would go one way, the other hand would go the other way. So some giant hands are turning your body as you're turning. So the back is going one way and the front is going the other. So thinking of ourselves as three-dimensional helps when we're online, that we have a back, okay? Now, which side are you putting your weight on? So when you start sitting, your weight's probably fairly even on the two sit bones. And then as you begin to turn and look over your shoulder, is it better if you put your weight on the same side that you're turning, or if you put your weight on the other side? Which makes you feel easier, more fluid, see further? And it's interesting because we're not used to being asked, what feels easier? Does it feel easier? We usually go, does it hurt if you do that? And if you go looking for things that hurt, we can usually find them. But if we go looking for ease, we can find that. And I want to build your skill at finding ease. To me, it's like my goal is that you become as lazy in your movement as possible, just finding the easiest, simplest way to move and support your head. Alrighty. Now, go ahead and turn and look over this shoulder again and stay turned. And you'll notice how one shoulder is forward and one shoulder is backward a little bit as you're doing that. Take just your eyeballs and move your eyeballs left and right. So you stay turned and move your eyeballs. You can keep them closed even as you move them, and see if you sense something in the back of your neck as your eyeballs move. And you might also sense your tongue doing something. Does your tongue press, or sometimes it actually moves with the eyes? Okay. Come back to the front. And facing front, move your eyeballs left and right. And see if your tongue's moving, and if not, invite it to move with your eyeballs. So as your eyes go right, your tongue goes right. As your eyes go left, your tongue goes left. And there's a little pressure inside your nose as you do that, one side to the other perhaps. And you might feel a very subtle weight change on your sit bones or on your feet. Okay. Now, take your tongue opposite your eyes. So if your eyes go right, take your tongue left, and vice versa. Good. Now leave your eyes focused straight ahead, stare at something in the Zoom meeting, and then turn the rest of you, but leave your head and your eyes behind. So you turn your shoulders, you let your one sit bone slide forward. Isn't this the way they did high school yearbook pictures? Yeah, they kind of have you sit and look over your shoulder a little bit. Good. And now come back and look over your shoulder and just see what it's like now to look. See if there's even a little bit more freedom in this movement. So Feldenkrais, this method is based on physics and the physiology of movement. But there's this idea of degrees of freedom. Like if you just have one joint, there's a certain amount of motion. And if you have two joints, you have the motion of one plus the motion of the other. And we have a lot of parts of us that can move independently, and our eyeballs are one of the parts that can move independently. Our culture, our world, we move as the unit. We have our hands on the steering wheel and the car turns, so we turn. Or we're cooking and we're chopping and looking at things or doing something, or we're at our computer. Everything is fixed. And I'm just reminding your bodies today that the parts can move independently of each other. The tongue and eyeball thing is an interesting one. You can often increase reading speed for people by getting their tongue and their eyes to move independently of each other. A lot of times with little kids, and sometimes it sticks with us to adulthood, our tongue moves with our eyes as we're trying to read, and our tongues are slower than our eyes. And so if you can get those two pieces independent, then reading speed can improve. So if you're looking for a way, if you're teaching an adult basic ed, or people talk about it, it's just a little quick thing you can give the students to play with, gives everybody a laugh break as they try and get their eyes and tongue going opposite. Alrighty. So let's turn again to the same side, and this time feel what your feet are doing. And if you're wearing shoes, you might kick them off just so that you can sense the floor a little easier with your feet. And turn back. See if there's a way that one foot pushes into the floor, one pulls a little. And what are your knees doing? Are your knees rolling toward each other? Are they staying put? Where's the weight on your feet? Is it toward the big toe side or toward the middle somewhere, or perhaps underneath? Like you've got 5 toes on your feet, you could have the weight on this line or this line. Where's the line? Does the weight shift a little bit? Okay. Now, where do you start this movement from? You could start it from your eyeballs. You could take your eyeballs, which turn your head, which turn your neck vertebrae, which turn your shoulders, which turn your ribs and your spine and your sit bones and your feet. Okay. You could start with your shoulders. If you turn your shoulders first, that turns your neck and your head, and it turns your spine and your sit bones. And you could start with your sit bones. So you slide the sit bone, and that turns the spine. You could start with your knees and feet. Move one knee forward, push, pull into the ground a little bit. Which of those feels the most powerful? Go ahead and experiment a little bit. You could start by turning your belly button or your lower back in the back, or one armpit or the other armpit. It's like we can start movement in infinite ways. And you know how when you see somebody, even if it's at night and you can just barely see their silhouette, you know who it is by the shape of them as they move. These habits of where we start movement are a big part of that, but they're changeable. And the way we change it is this looking for ease. The brain, human beings are inherently lazy. When we find an easier way to do something, we usually just do it. So, okay, rest for a moment. And for curiosity, see with this new map of yourself what it's like when you turn the other way again. Okay. So I want to spend a few more minutes waking up sit bones. So for this, it's going to be really helpful to have a book. So if you can grab a book off of a shelf, doesn't need to be big. It can be just like a paperback or and we're going to work with the second side, the side that we haven't worked with as much. I want you to put that book on your chair under half your bottom, just under that 1/2, so that your chair is now lopsided. But the book gives your sit bone a little bit more sensation than the chair does. And I want you to come up onto, so somehow lift your other hip so that you're up on the book. So there's air under one sit bone, or at least it's not pressing in the chair, and you're up on that book. Okay. And while you're up on the book, go a little forward and backward with your body so that you can feel when you're in front of the round part of your sit bone, and then you get to the round part of the sit bone and you go a little behind it. Because the sit bone has a curve and then a flat spot as it comes forward toward your pubic bone. Okay. And there's a way that the sit bone can actually grab this book, and like you can lead by your sit bone. It cuts into the book and you go forward, and then it pushes in the book the other way and you go backward. Take the book out for a moment and see if just with that play, that side of your bottom is a little more comfortable in the chair. The chair got a little softer somehow. And then put the book back in. Come up on the book. And this time with your sit bone, try and carve in sideways. So I think the bottom it reminds me of a melon scoop, right? There's an edge, and I'm scooping one way in the book, and then I'm scooping the other way. And as you scoop, that's a way to lift yourself onto the book. If you put your hands on your the iliac crest, the top bone of your pelvis, you can feel how your pelvis will tip as you go up onto your book. Just did it backwards. But when you scoop with the sit bone, the other side of your hips lift up. Okay, good. Take the book out. And feel for the differences left and right in your body. Close your eyes for a moment because that intensifies your sensation. And see if one side of you feels a little taller, a little easier to breathe in. Sometimes I'll ask these questions and you go, yes, definitely. And sometimes no, and that's okay too, because it's the process of asking the questions that improves the communication between your brain and your sensory nerves coming up and your motor nerves going down. Come back up on your book. And now begin to turn around yourself on this side. So your sit bone becomes this axis and you're turning around that axis. So your the leg that's up, the sit bone that's off the chair, that's up in the air, can go forward much easier now because there's no friction on it. And see what it's like to how your sit bone is spinning in space. If it was a drill, it would be drilling a little hole in the book. And take your book out and rest. It's always fun seeing cattails on the screen. Okay. Come back on your book one more time. And turn to this side again and stay turned. So you're up on your book, turn to that side, and a few times round your back and look down, and your other sit bone will press into your chair, and then arch your back and look up, and your weight comes completely onto the book. It begins to go the other way when you look down, just sensing the ribs expanding, where they expand, where they compress. And which do you pay more attention to? Are you more aware of when your ribs compress or when they spread? All right, take the book out. Close your eyes. And are your knees the same height? Do your feet touch the ground the same way? If you could just take one side of you home right now, well, you are home, but which side is a more pleasant place to live inside? Let's even, oh, and now without the book, turn and look over this side. Okay, and let's try even just using the short stick for a moment. So just thinking about using your neck vertebrae, turn and look over this side and see if it's more comfortable than it was before. It's a little easier. Once we remind our body of the connections, then even the smaller movements are usually more comfortable. So let's open this up for discussion for a moment. And I just noticed that there was a chat. Kathy asked, is this recorded so you can watch it again? And yes, it is recorded, and we'll be posting it on the internal BC YouTube channel. And once I get that information, I can send a link out to you. Because you can do the same lesson. Every time I do this lesson, I feel better. And I've probably done it 1,000 times over the years. But it just reminds your body that you can be a team instead of an individual player. It's a very different way of thinking about things, because usually, like, you go to a physical therapist or a doctor, you say, my neck hurts, and they'll prescribe some neck exercises. And here, the part that hurts, I think of as the victim of some other part not doing its job. So if the neck is sore, it's the sit bones and the spine and the legs not supporting the head well. And once you get that support, then the neck can be comfortable. So it gives you, it's a bit of a paradigm shift, because we're really used to thinking, I have a bad knee, I have a bad foot, I have a bad shoulder. And instead of that, it's, what am I doing to support my shoulder? What am I doing to support my knee? And when you flip the question that way, different answers come out of it. And I think it's the, I remember having this amazing moment in like 7th grade history, that I thought history was about learning facts and numbers for tests and doing what my teacher wanted. And then the teacher started having us, how do you think like a historian? And I started thinking about it differently and asking different questions. And then my whole experience of history transformed. This is a transforming your relationship with your body, of the, how do you have just one tendril of your awareness paying attention to, am I comfortable? What can I do to be more comfortable right now? And so I'd love to open it up for discussion for a few minutes, and then I'm going to talk about the practical ergonomics part of things. So any comments from this experience?
Am I right in the assumption that if we do one side, we should do the other side as well?
So almost all Feldenkrais lessons, we do one-sided first, and then we even ourselves out afterwards. But when you do one side and you can feel a really clear difference between left and right, that wakes up the learning switch and the brain gets interested. It's like, I didn't realize it was possible to be this comfortable in my chair. I want to learn that on the other. And so we get thirsty for the learning. So it's better in most cases to do one side for a while until it feels different. And then you can go back and do the other side. But you could see how quick it is on the other side to learn, because we do all the work of changing the brain map usually on the first side, and then the second side gets it quicker.
Okay.
But even if you don't deliberately do it, your brain will be playing with this all day, the movement part of the brain, and you'll even out over time. Yeah, there are questions or...
How often should we do these exercises, Irene?
It's funny, I don't want you to think of them as exercises, because an exercise is something that usually people do kind of mindlessly. It's like, I need to do 10 repetitions of lifting this weight. But I'm not working with your body as much as with your brain. And brains don't respond well to doing the same thing over and over again. It's like rote things just put us to sleep. And so it's the, how do you become curious about your body? And that hundreds of times a day, to become curious about your body. You know, you're driving and you start playing with, I wonder, is it more comfortable if I put my hands here or if I put my hands here? Is it more comfortable if I squeeze my butt back into the seat deeper, or if I sit toward the front of the seat? So it's the curiosity I want you to practice more than the lesson. Yeah. That said, I find that every time I do this particular lesson of playing with trying to turn from different parts of myself, I feel invigorated. And so I do play with little pieces of the lesson, but no need to do the whole thing. None of the steps are essential. It's more to get the brain curious that is the essential part.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think these exercises kind of remind me of when I had knee surgery a while back on one side, and it took a really long time for it to heal. And I shifted, my movements and body so that I wasn't using that knee. And the following year, I had to get knee surgery on the other knee. And so it's this like idea that like I don't realize that, if I'm not balanced, I'm putting a lot of strain on the other side of my body. And then I had to get surgery on that side as well. So just that importance of just making, being aware of that full body connection.
Knees are particularly, I just happen to have a spare knee here. The knee has these two spots, left and right, and the weight needs to go through both of them in order for the knee to be happy. And if you're not transferring your weight fully, the weight only goes through one side, and that side you wear out the cartilage and you need some knee surgery or you hurt yourself. And we have those patterns in us of being asymmetric for a reason. There's research that shows if you sprain your ankle as a kid, you can see it in your gait as an adult. And we've all, by the time we get to our ages, have had some injuries of one sort or another. And when you have an injury, like with your knee, you have to keep it still because otherwise it can't heal. And your body forgets that all the pieces are supposed to move. And I find doing these Feldenkrais things after an injury very helpful to get people more balanced. But our emotional patterns from our families will do it as well. I was the littlest kid in a family, and my nickname was Monster and Pest. And my brother and sister would beat up on me because I was an irritating annoyance, I guess, in their world. And I learned that I needed to be invisible. And to be invisible, I had to kind of shrink in. And then, of course, puberty hits and you grow these funny things on your chest and like, I don't want people to see those, whatever. I kind of was a shrinker. And then I wanted to start my own business. Well, when you're starting your own business, you can't be invisible. You have to be seen. And I had to learn some new movement patterns because of that. Or, my brother was a tickler, and he used to delight in torturing me for tickling. And the only way I could stop feeling tickled was to clench. And I developed a pattern of clenching my butt, which was protecting myself as a kid. And I've had to unlearn that pattern because it doesn't serve me well now. But sometimes people start, when they hear that they cause their own problems, you start feeling like, oh, one more thing to beat myself up over. But it isn't that. It's more one thing to be curious about and go on a learning journey about. But our patterns can be deeply wired, because as a kid they just fire. One of the ideas of neuroplasticity is what fires together wires together, and we deepen the groove in our brain's communication to our body back and forth by doing it over and over again. And kid patterns and injury patterns will groove those things deep and have to be relearned for comfort. Yeah.
This is probably ergonomics, but do you think a person should sit on a harder chair or a softer chair?
Well, the sit bones are pretty darn close to the skin, even when we have ample bottoms. So I think a little bit of padding is a good thing. But what I do have strong feelings about are the shape of the bottom of the chair. That if you sit in a chair that's kind of a sling chair that's lower in the middle, higher on the sides, it pushes your knees in a little bit. And let's everybody try that. Let's come to the front of your chair and put your knees so they're touching each other and your feet are a little wider than your knees. And like that, try and turn and look over your shoulder. And see how it kind of like it doesn't work as well. The whole body doesn't feel as free. And then take your knees wide, get your feet flat under you, and turn and look around yourself again. So a chair can really immobilize you if it has the slouch kind of thing built into it. So I find a lot of people have trouble in their cars because cars have a very rounded seat because they're meant to help hold you so that when you go around a corner, you don't slide. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the old bench seat cars where you kind of slid around a little bit more. But people who are having back pain, neck pain, whatever, I suggest putting a towel to fill in some of that sag, and then people are usually much more comfortable as they're driving. So that would be something to look at in your chair. I sometimes use a flat stool, and I got this at IKEA it's a $5 chair cushion, but it's enough padding that keeps my sit bones happy when I'm on a hard stool. I do recommend this sitting toward the front of your chair rather than sitting deep in your chair, because our hamstrings aren't really meant to be sat on in the middle. They're meant to bend our legs, and it's especially if you have that feeling in your legs after you've been sitting for a while, they just like get antsy and uncomfortable. Whatever, try sitting forward in your chair, and that will help. So I'm going to show a little video, and this is a video that Vodafone, one of the European phone companies, put together, and it's on YouTube, and I just love it because it's 3 minutes long and it covers everything you need to know about ergonomics. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do this one. And share. And I'm going to make it full screen. Oh, whoops. I just noticed that there's a participant. I'm going to stop for a sec. Sorry. There's somebody trying to get into the meeting, and I have to. There we go. Then I can share it. So are you seeing it? Okay. Alrighty. let's talk about what we saw in there. The most important is the idea of 90-degree angles. Whoops, YouTube is trying to do something else over here. We don't need another one. Okay, so your arm should be hanging down and this angle should be 90 degrees. Your hips, your legs to your torso should be 90 and your lower legs should be 90. Now, when we're working at home, a lot of people are working on dining room tables and fixed tables, not adjustable height desks. So you often have to get everything adjusted to that surface. So for short people like me, that means using a footrest, using a couple telephone books, some old high school yearbooks, whatever it is to put under my feet. You want something that feels solid under your feet, and raising the chair so that I'm high enough to use that fixed table. If you're using a laptop, it's worth getting a spare keyboard for it so you can, like they showed with the, I think it was the guy, the video lifted the laptop up so the screen was at a little downward angle to his face, and he had a separate keyboard that was at the comfortable table height. Goodwill usually has used keyboards for $5, so you don't, it's not a lot of money to get a spare keyboard if you need one for your laptop. But for eye strain, how many of you wear progressive lenses? Okay, so you can kind of find yourself doing this as you're working on the computer, which one of the things that I did was bought myself a separate pair of computer glasses. Of course, I did this before my Zoom days, and you can see how much reflection there is, which isn't so nice for teaching because it's nice when people can see your eyes. So I tend to use these for my prep work and these when I'm teaching. But the advantage of the computer glasses is that they have the whole screen for looking at the computer, so that you have a little bit, your neck isn't having to do the work of getting your eyes to the right spot. What else? Ergonomics. The lighting, I thought that was cute in the video of, like, keep the light off your screen. So when you work on Zoom all day, where are the places you get sore? I'd love to. Okay. So is Eva or Ava?
Either way is fine.
Okay. How many people get sore there like Eva does? Yeah. So that's often because our keyboard is a little too high. And so if you do a little bit of this raising your shoulders, everybody try that. Raise your shoulder and try and type. Even just the tiniest bit of that over the course of a day will get you in trouble. So look at raising your chair a little bit and getting a footrest so that your arms might be a little higher in relationship to the keyboard. Where else? Maybe we can troubleshoot some of these patterns to.
Actually, even I noticed when we were doing the exercises, the top of my legs hurt.
The top of your legs, so like the
muscles on the top of the legs.
Okay, so your quadricep muscles up on the top. How tall are you, Carol?
Around 5'3".
Okay, when you're sitting, is the muscle, are your upper legs and your torso at right angles, or do your legs point down a little to get to the floor?
I think they're pretty close to right angles.
Okay. You might try putting a footrest under, even just like an inch or 2 inches might be. Because one of the things that happens when we're a little shorter, I'm also 5'3", is that we use our legs to hold ourselves in the chair. It's like we're pushing into the floor so that we don't slide off of it. And often people sit with their toes like this on the floor because that's the only way that we can reach the ground. And that is using the leg muscles. And so that might be one of the things that's going on with that part. The other is to look when you're sitting, are your feet flat under your knees? If you let your knees roll in toward the middle, that also puts some stress on that part of the leg. So those are some things to play with. If your feet roll in so that your weight's on your big toe, that will stress the muscles on the top of the inside of the top of your leg. If you let your feet roll a little toward their outside edge, then that stresses a different set of muscles. So those are just things to play with.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have a specific challenge area?
My lower back hurts.
Okay. So one of the concepts, let's do something actually. I forgot to do this and it's really helpful for everybody in their sitting. Go ahead and reach under and find a sit bone. So your hand goes as if it's going in your back pocket, keeps going down and finds the sit bone. Okay, and lift up a little bit so that sit bone comes off your chair, and then pull the sit bone at a 45-degree angle back behind you, and then put it down again. And see how that side of you has a little bit more base for sitting on? It just feels a little bigger. And then try the other side. So you get under the sit bone and you pull it out 45 degrees behind you. It's like you just made your bum a little bigger. But when you sit there, it makes you sit a little bit more forward from where you usually do. And that puts less stress on the lower back. The sit bones are curved on the bottom, and then there's a flat surface that goes forward to the pubic bones. And if you tilted your hip joints a little bit further forward, and I'm not saying you need to go and kiss your keyboard, it's just like there's this tiny place where, I'm on a flat spot on my sit bones, and then the bones just stack themselves up. That's usually a better place for your lower back than if you sit behind your sit bones or on that curvy part, that rounded part in the back of the sit bones. When you sit on something round, it wants to roll, and it rolls you backward into a slouch. So you're fighting that all the time. But if you find that flatter spot, the bones can stack up, and it's usually less stress. So in the theory of when something hurts, it's something else that's usually the cause. If our lower back is engaged, it may be because of our alignment, and it may be because you don't have mobility in your chest or your hip joints. And so working on the hip joint to be able to come forward under yourself, and then that your upper chest can wiggle around, and just trying to have prehensile shoulder blades, like the shoulder blades can come and grab something. Those movements will usually help the low back. There's one other thing that can get a low back, and for this I'm going to use the arm as an explanation, but our body has pairs of muscles. So this muscle closes the elbow joint, and this muscle opens the elbow joint. They're pairs. And the muscles in our low back are paired with the muscles in our belly. Some people have this idea that they're supposed to keep their belly tight all the time. You hear, keep your core tight as you're doing things. Well, if your belly is tight and then you need to use your low back has to fight against the belly. And you get this battle of the two muscles. So knowing that when you want to look down, you have to tighten your belly. And when you want to look up, you have to push your belly forward. That those muscles are only involved in one of those two things. Sometimes people can get low back problems because they're very focused on a tight belly. So those are some ideas to experiment with. And come to some more of these classes this week, because we'll be playing as we talk about how do you support your arms, how do you keep your eyes happy. Various pieces come into play. And then I'm thinking I'm going to do I'm putting in a proposal for Faculty Commons to do a weekly troubleshooting of, like, you just want to drop in and say, my X hurts, what can I do? And
That sounds really good, because I felt like sitting, I thought, well, I've been teaching for so long, I've been sitting enough hours in a day, but it really, the 3 months teaching only in my chair 8 hours a day, it really pulled a number on me. I thought that I was already very aware with body, and I work out, and still it's my knees hurt ever since, and yeah, things just aggravated my shoulders, my neck, and I have to put even more consciousness into it, how I'm holding my body. So this class is really helpful, and I would like that if we could have a check-in, so it's not perpetuating.
the first people who found the Feldenkrais method were athletes, musicians, and people with severe problems like cerebral palsy. And it's when you use yourself in repetitive things over time that challenges happen, and you have to grow to a new level of awareness. So it's no accident that you're seeking out this now, because you are having to become an expert in sitting and staring at little boxes on the screen. Who knew that that's what we evolved to do? But it is a strange thing that we're asking of ourselves. And you can learn some skills that will help. And just like in the video, the little things of standing up for a minute in between classes. If you're teaching a class, offer your students a stand-up break. You don't have to tell them it's because you need it. That, they probably do too if they're taking multiple classes.
It should have been applied every 30 minutes. I heard it was around an hour. Every hour you should stand up.
You know your own body. If I'm somebody who really likes to move, and so if I can stand up every half hour, I'm happy. But if you're teaching an hour class, you might stand up in between. You might teach 55-minute classes or whatever, so that there's that little break.
I teach 3-hour classes.
If you teach 3-hour classes, I would give people a break every 45 minutes, so 2 breaks in the middle. And people need more breaks in these online classes than they do in person. Yeah. Just the brains get tired. Alrighty. So thank you.
Irene, sorry,
Yeah.
one more quick question.
Sure.
What's your opinion of exercise balls and sitting on an exercise ball at your desk?
So sitting in an exercise ball makes you move all the time, and so you're using all of your muscles, and you're playing with your balance, and that's great. If you're interested in doing that, start with 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Don't sit yourself on one of those for 8 hours, or the next day you're going to wake up really sore because you'll be using muscles you didn't know you had. I like, I should go up to my office and get one. I don't have one at home, but there are what's called a Dynadisc, which looks like a pancake that's as big as your chair. And it doesn't give quite as much freedom as an exercise ball does, but it gives enough that it keeps you moving. And if you're one of those where your sit bones just ache by the end of the day from sitting on them, that gives like an air padding instead of a solid padding, and is more comfortable. I'll have one of those to demo it for tomorrow. All right, well, I hope to see you in one of the classes later this week, and I hope this has helped your ability, giving you some ideas of things to play with as you're sitting. If you remember nothing else, remember that thing of reaching under your sit bone and pulling it out at 45 degrees so you have a wider base of support underneath you. And enjoy your classes today, and see you soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Irene.
Irene.
Thank you.
Thank you
So
very
much.
much.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.